I'm Greg Robinson. I'm the Chief Curator here at BIMA, and I'm just going to say a few welcoming words. It is a thrill tonight to be able to celebrate so fully the Cynthia Sears Artist Book Collection and what it not only brings to BIMA in terms of our mission and engagement with the broader public, but the service it does to the entire arts community and the public. I think most of you know this, but Bainbridge Island Museum of Art is in this very, if not unique, very rare situation where we're able to collect and show artist books. A lot of the collections, which are very large and voluminous, no pun intended, but they belong in special collections libraries across the United States, which are very, very important and accessible to the public. People can go in and research things and look at things, but it's in a more limited format, and it sort of reinforces the special nature in the sense that the public doesn't perceive that there's as much access to this wonderful art media as it is. As the chief curator, I think of artist books as part of a family of other arts media that has not been seen in the fine art world historically in museums. We can remember when photography, of course, when it was new and seen as more of a documentary form than an art form, wasn't initially in fine art museums. Ceramics, glass, most of the craft world. And I just think it's, we of course at BIMA, I won't say we don't distinguish between fine art and craft. There can be distinctions, but there's no hierarchy, and we really blur any sense about that. So I am really honored to be able to be in a position to help promote in a broader way this art form, and also to articulate how complicated and diverse it is. And I want to thank Cynthia Sears, who's here tonight, our founder, and of course, our founder, and of course, the founder of the Cynthia Sears Artist Book Collection. And I want to thank Catherine Michaels for working so closely with her for now. Catherine, is it a few years, or? Yeah. And you were helping and advising before that. And before we get started with the formal program, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land on which we gather is within the Aboriginal territory of the Suquab, people of the clear salt water, Suquamish people. Expert fishers, canoe builders, and basket weavers, the Suquab live in harmony with the land and waterways along Washington's central Salish Sea, as they have for thousands of years. Here the Suquab live and protect the land and waters of their ancestors for future generations, as promised by the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. We pay respect to their elders past and present. And speaking of present, on the second floor we have the Indigenous Strength and Wellness exhibition, which is the third exhibition the Suquamish tribe has helped us as very formal advisors and funders. Robin Saigo of the tribe is actually co-curator with Gail Tremblay and myself. Robin Saigo is with the Suquamish tribe, and we're greatly indebted for their investment in helping us to learn and get better at understanding and promoting Indigenous art. I'd like to introduce Catherine Michaels, and she will introduce Karen Kunc. And Karen, you've had an amazing, just short trip already, but with an opening at Davidson Galleries in Pioneer Square, etc. So it's a real honor to meet you. Thanks for being here.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming, some of you from so very, very far away. Cynthia and I were thrilled to have brought Karen Kunc to BIMA and to feature her fabulous, masterful printmaking. Her show, Forms and Forces, is the second solo show in the Sherry Grover Gallery. Her show includes artist books and prints, and you'll find 4 of her prints, 2 of them quite large, in the hallway opposite the gallery, if you haven't been up yet. The majority of artist books in the show are from the Cynthia Sears collection, and the ones that are on loan will soon be joining them. We're excited. Karen Kunc is from Omaha, Nebraska. She received a BFA from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and an MFA from Ohio State University. She has taught workshops around the world, including Mexico, France, Poland, Finland, and Bangladesh, and is a professor emeritus at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. She is the owner of Constellation Studios, a creative work site for artist residencies, collaborations, and workshops, also in Lincoln, Nebraska. And having visited her place myself, I encourage you to go if you have even the slightest inclination. It's a really amazing place. Kunc is known for her colorful woodcuts that reference elements of the natural world. She uses her printmaking processes to mirror both natural and human impacts on the earth, reflecting the cyclical processes of evolution and destruction. We have a catalog of her work on sale in the museum store, along with some of her artist books that are available if you're interested. And Karen is also having a print show at Davidson Galleries in Pioneer Square for the month of April. She's teaching a 3-day workshop at Barn on the Island today. Today it began and goes through Sunday. And she's also going to be in the gallery on Monday for Meet the Artist. I don't know the time.
I think it's 11.
11 to 12:30 or something like that. Her work has been shown internationally and awarded by many, many institutions. It's truly an honor to have her here. Let's give a warm welcome to our beloved Karen Kunc.
Okay. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for being here. I owe so many thank yous to all the people here at BIMA and at Davidson Gallery. I have met so many names. It's kind of a big swirl up there. I do owe a lot to Cynthia Sears. Thank you for being such a wonderful patron of my work. I'm so appreciative of that. And Catherine Ellis, who has helped with all the curating and helping make this happen. So I'm just really thrilled to be here. And I hope you can hear me. Everybody okay? And this light can go down a little bit so that the slides will glow. I would really like you to see everything. I've titled the talk "The Space Within," which is really about thinking what goes on in my mind, and I'm going to try and reveal some of this. This book work here is called Aqua Alta, and I actually will not show things in chronological order. It's going to get mixed up, and I can't remember any dates, so we'll just have to see how that goes, and you're going to see the interrelationships that end up making it much more interesting for me to talk about. And actually, the space within is about all the big questions and how that I'm actually searching for questions that help me work through the art that I'm doing. Like they said, I'm from Nebraska. It's way out there in the middle, very different from here, and we all have our mythical ideas about place. And certainly that's one of the things about Nebraska, the big open skies, the university, which has been my academic home for 37 years. I retired 3 years ago. And actually, it's a great place to have a perspective that goes outward. I'm always looking out, but value the opportunity to be home and contrast those differences of going out and coming back. Who I am is certainly shaped by my place and being grounded literally with the family in the middle of everywhere. So you see me, I'm the second one from the right in our Czech costumes. We learned Czech songs from my grandmother. And here I am picking up walnuts in the yard. Literally, you have to take care of your ground. We did a lot of summer vacations in the Vista Cruiser, going around, and it actually places a sense of perspective and a sense of a map in my mind. I really understand those proportions of distance and space. Actually, I learned that my great-grandfather did some bookbinding, and his little stamp is there in a book that he probably did just binding magazines together, and there's his old book press that I have. So maybe there's some legacy in that. I grew up in the 60s, 50s, 60s, and certainly that was the time to know about the future, where we were all going to be riding on rockets, weren't we? But actually, my identity as an artist was shaped very early on. Luckily, when I was in 3rd grade, I got art lessons over the summer. And that's in compensation for my sister, a year younger, who was advanced into my class. So I got the reward of art lessons, which I think was really wonderful. So all of those influences, I think, are embedded in my art. You'll see that the 60s pop art, the psychedelics, I had a poster very similar to that in the room. And my first job was to silkscreen Halloween costumes. It was a printmaking job, so I was really thrilled with that. So there's all that costume that's, and the garish quality of some of that modern art, I think, is still in my works. So the road trips really, for family vacations, was about questing, looking for things, having a goal, doing hiking, finding treasures with rock hunting. And there you find the fossils, the petrified wood, canoeing through the Boundary Waters canoe area, finding Indian petroglyphs, and all of that is really about the search for the natural wonders that are already out there. And those things were so beautiful, like the Mexican crazy lace agate that's at the top. I still think those influence me, the idea of the stones and the rocks. My parents used those finds to make jewelry. And the blue heron is kind of my alter ego. I always needed studios, and of course I had lots of different situations over the years, including studios in basements, garages. We built a metal-sided building, my studio at the university. I had all those places and equipment that I duplicated to be able to work wherever I was at. Up there in the upper left corner, you see me in my ugly duckling phase in high school. But that piece that I'm showing off is actually really significant because it has the fractured sky and all the shapes that I invented. But I know I was influenced and inspired by Charles Demuth's work. So that extensive travel has been something, Catherine mentioned it in my resume, all these opportunities to go and work and teach, travel, exhibit has been incredible. Some of that was driven by being a university professor where you have to publish or perish. But it was wonderful to travel to all these exotic locations and have some art-related business with it, teaching workshops, doing residencies. You see Italy, Bangladesh, Egypt, and the Sandhills in Nebraska, where we took the press out onto the prairie. But all of that teaching was really a work at communication. How do you make an effort to explain things to people over and over again, especially when you're a foreigner in a foreign land? You have to work and struggle with language, and it kind of brings the essence of communication to a really important essence. Now I have Constellation Studios, which I really think is a legacy project. It's something where I brought all my equipment together. It's 9 years old now. I bought a storefront and had it renovated, and it's intended to be an art center where people come to me instead of me going everywhere. It's got beautiful spaces, and my 6 or 7 presses are all there. So my goal is to not have a press leave Nebraska. But the constellation is that metaphor about all this interconnections and networks and all the people I know all around the world. And that connection can happen even if we're not technically side by side. It still can exist. Of course, I had a lot of family support from my family and my late husband, Kenny Walton. Here's his glass, and you can see the aesthetic similarity, can't you? His work is beautiful, hand-blown glass, and we always felt that we were supportive of each other, never critical. So we just said, that's good, keep going. But also the subtle influence would happen by walking through the studio and seeing what he was working on, and he could see things in my work. So it's been an unbelievable journey that I have lived through so far, and you can see all that history embedded in my work. And sometimes I'm just astonished and surprised about what I've done and how far I've gone and how all of that is in these works. These are new works, so you're seeing some of the latest. The top work is just brand new, Labyrinth, and the bottom one, Drifts of Ice and Gold. These are woodcuts. How did I get there? It's still amazing to me, and it all looks like my work. So I'll show you some influences and background. Certainly, my influence in bookmaking is part of printmaking history, and I have always identified as one of the scribes, drawing and making illuminations and decorations, embellishing, making something really beautiful. You see the scribes up there, looking with their scrolls of paper, those beautiful books. So they were one of a kind. But then there's also the print history and that transition between the manuscript and Gutenberg and the technology of what happened with printing invention and distribution of the technology all around the world and how fast that happened. It's similar to the technology change that we're going through right now. So here you see Gutenberg and his prints, his printed Bible. So I was very influenced about making books by taking one small class in the art education department when I was a graduate student. And it was bookmaking, and we did the blender making, paper making, and one book binding and one typography. But then it inspired me to do books. So these are my earliest books that were done for my graduate thesis show. I wanted to extend and exaggerate the format even then. So the book on your right is monoprint book, and it's a lot of pages and opens very extensively. The other one unfolds like map pieces, papers that are folded like a map, and then they're encased in these glass stained glass boxes. And early on, I was very interested in exploring all the decorative paper making processes, making handmade paper. Here's marbling, where it saved a small section that had the print in it. So I was combining the two even early on. And then when I got back to Nebraska after being in Ohio 9 years, I worked with Harry Duncan of the Abattoir and the Cummington Press. He's considered the father of the private press movement. He worked early on in the 30s and 40s and was a professor at the University of Nebraska in Omaha. So I took some letterpress workshops with him, and he was a follower of the crystal goblet theory of book design, where all parts equal to each other and don't outshine any part and don't outshine the text. So it really enhances the text like a crystal goblet enhances the wine. And here's one book where I collaborated with him. I did the wood engravings, and it's very classical and beautiful. He has such a wonderful sense of design with typography. And this is the work that I made with Harry Duncan at the time, Lyric, where the text and the space interrelates. The text is about medieval love song, of chivalry and animated notions of love, from a 13th century love song by Guido della Colonna. So it was really a wonderful project to start with, really getting some of my letterpress skills. And then, of course, you can tell in my work I'm influenced from the woodcut traditions, and that goes in two directions. Certainly from Europe, there's the German expressionists who do woodcut for the rough, honest quality of the wood material itself. So you see Kirchner's example there, that are rough-hewn and honest and expressionistic. So I certainly am operating with that direction in my woodcuts, but then there's the side from Asia, particularly the Japanese ukiyo-e woodblock prints that are so beautiful and so worldwide influential. And why do I have that influence in Nebraska? But when I was in school, we had an art historian who gave us 3 years of Asian art history. So I took all of those classes and really understood and identified with some of the aesthetic choices that you see, in, especially the prints, where things are stacked up on top of each other and tied to the edges, and you have flat planes of space, and all of that is a characteristic that still enters my work. So it helped me over the years to kind of analyze facets of my work and what I use and the materials. So paper is an important foundation. And here I have an example of a paper wasp nest, which is very honest. You can tell where the wasp itself collected the vegetable matter and pressed it all together. And that's what paper making is that transformation of raw matter, the fibers that get mashed together. But it allowed me to think about interesting papers to print on and where I would find them, and certainly the Japanese papers are influential. That's what the print is on, is a paper called churi that carries the little specks of bark yet in it. And when I was in Japan in the 90s, I think, I don't remember when it was, but I did have a chance to work in a paper mill for a day. And you have to pick out all those little specks of bark to clean the fiber to the level that's acceptable, that we see as beautiful papers now. That's a lot of work, usually done by the grandmothers on their knees. And I had to work with them, and it was really a kind of a meditative experience to focus down on the minutia and the care of making that material. So paper becomes almost like a subject in my work as well. A paper that here is like a house structure, just with the paper walls. The concept of the paper as a carrier is a barrier. It's fragile, but also strong. And some of the paper in my prints, I actually shape it, tear it to a contour. And this print is about that sequencing like prayer flags. And here's ephemera, which is in the exhibition upstairs. One of the facets that I love about printing on this these papers is that it's translucent. And the front and back become very effective and interesting. And when I'm working, I'm seeing the back of the print all the time. So here's a work where I literally used both the front and the back as part of the image. Then the other aspect of material use is the wood. And I do woodcut prints. How did I arrive at wood? Is because it's practical and it's accessible and it's everywhere. And I like looking at wood objects and found wood and worn, weathered wood. The trees here are amazing to study for the wood. Here's a fence in western Nebraska where there are no trees. And that waste is still used from a mill to make that fence. And this is a little sketch in a national park where the wood has a function. It's keeping all those visitors from falling off the cliffs. So that wood becomes a subject that I end up using and have played with over many years of different manifestations of the drawing from the sketches. Here's two tree forms that have different effects by their weathering and effect of mankind trimming and shaping the branching fate, but the one that's blown in the wind is more natural and growing and also twisted. So that becomes the subject about the forces of nature that's so beautifully used for the title of my show. So my process begins with lots of doodles. I scribble and sketch. I'm a great one to doodle while I'm talking on the telephone, thinking, getting my hand moving. You can see some tree forms in some of these sketches. Here's the beginning sketches for the work Ephemera. And up above you see a sketch that I drew in a museum in Iceland. That's the center spread of a saga book. And you can see the holes that are worn from the pages being turned over 500 years. So I've had the workshop today, and everybody's quite mystified by all the processes of working in the woodcut, but they're going to learn it and we'll work together. I like to use two wood blocks, even though it's a reduction wood block method, and reduction always means that you're printing and carving and destroying the block as you go along. Usually I do maybe 8 to 12 stages to develop an image and put all the colors and layers on it. And here you can see two blocks that are like a negative positive. But I still carve and destroy the block, but it makes it an efficient way to work. I use a lot of paper stencils that allow me to put the ink through the stencil onto the block, so it's selective inking. And I use an etching press to put the paper onto the block when the ink is on it and run it through the press, which transfers the ink to the paper. So it's pretty mysterious yet to me. It's always fun. I'm not a great carver. I think I'm a wood cutter. I gash the wood and it struggles and it fights with me. And I actually want to have that engagement with the wood, with the material, because I have enough of a perfection instinct that it keeps it in moderation, because I have something that's fighting back with me. Here's the wood blocks being carved. I use a lot of colors, oil-based ink that is applied with rollers, and lots of different colors. I can sometimes apply 8 colors at a time. Between 4 and 8 is kind of typical, especially on a large print. I carve my blocks by hand. And then you see some more of that applying. And then there's actually a whole aspect of printing that relies on how the ink is used, how it's manipulated, how many blendings and rolling and application as well, while being efficient. That's kind of part of what printmaking is about too, to edit things down so that you can actually make it happen, because you can't do everything. I can't make it look like anything that I could draw or paint, and I don't like to paint, so it always has to happen in the wood block. Once the ink is on the wood, through the stencil, I take the stencil away, and then I manipulate the ink on the surface further by blending out with my hands or fingers or rags, and I'm making gradations and all those glowing, soft passages. That's done by manipulating the ink. You can see how sharp the edges look there, and when I'm done blending it, those edges disappear. And I get to really see the print developing from the inside stages. So you're seeing several works here in process where I'm just concentrating on that one stage, doing that color. I make limited editions, so I have to print however many I want at that stage. I don't know what it's going to look like. I have a guideline of a large sketch, which you see on the wall. So I have time to actually think while I'm working about the next stage and to speculate on how I'm going to carve and cut. And some of that is always a mystery to me, and then I make spontaneous decisions when I'm ready to go to the next stage. Here you see, one time I actually took all the different stages. I don't usually document that. I don't need to document it. I'm just going, the print is the document in a way, but here is the step-by-step stages of the print place naming. And I actually was very interested in the back side of the print also, and put color on the back as well. And you can see all my stencils in the foreground here, and the blocks, the number of blocks that it took to do. So I did actually use more than just 2 blocks. There were 5 blocks. So I addition as I go, and I'm committed to making that addition and finding the best choice and executing the addition. Sometimes I don't make this many. This was done for an exchange project where everybody else made a print the same size, and then we all got to exchange. So that's part of the democratic nature of the print, giving it away, being willing to trade with other people, and it's a gift action that is part of printmaking. You make more than one, they have to go out into the world. So I'm thinking also about concepts of the book, and have been very interested in the history of the book as in an archive, in a library. Here, this is in Italy, at a municipal castle, and they had all these ancient books there, which probably had years of records. And you see the other images where the library is in the Wonder Cabinet, the same place as where the museum would be. How wonderful and important and valuable the books were. So there's a lot of theory about books that go beyond just the making and just the techniques of sewing and stitching. So on one side of this sequence that I usually show to my students, you can see the basics, gluing things together. But that really becomes about bigger concepts. How do you cover and uncover things? How do you contain, preserve? How do you read? All of those become some of these big questions that I'm interested in. And then it's a way we are mining the depths in this field, something that we know so well, so intimately. Everybody understands the book, but how do you take it beyond that? So I'm interested in that idea, the concept of the problem of gathering. How do you make order? How do you do sequences? And there's lots of ideas about the gathering of materials and binding them together, including the junk pile in somebody was being evicted, I think. And the materials that are gathered, how artists are thinking of tying things together. Is that a book? But maybe it could be counted as part of those concepts. So some of that has led me to doing alternative materials for the book as well. This book, prayer book, is literally carved from wood. It has wooden pages, gold leaf, and embedded inside are some of these very precious natural forms. This thorn bush branch. It actually feels great in the hand. I designed it so that it would just fit into my hands. And this book is like a big exposition. Its pages are exploring the ideas of where ideas originate for me. I think it's revealing. It's an open book is why it's called that, because I'm revealing all my ideas. And here you see a tree again, and then the tree as a slab, the tree rings. And of course it's done on tree itself, so there's that kind of continuation of that idea. Here's another one that's in the exhibition upstairs. Precious, it's very opulent. The cover is full of gold leaf and luminous paint, and the front cover holds all these precious stones and pieces of silver. And actually, I was equating it to the preciousness of other concepts that are more intangible, like hope, joy, time. That's part of that search within. And Working Riddles is another one that's up there. It's an exploration where I paired my own text. My text is really interesting words that go with another opposite concept, but then they both are related. If you have the working, but the riddle, I can't remember all the other text within it. Another wooden book. And this book trace is made with waxed pages, so they have almost a skin-like feeling, and collage elements and translucency. Evocations is about the hand of the artist. Of course, it's a beautiful poem, but the hands are active. They're shaping materials, they're squeezing, they're dripping, they're pointing, they're making blessings. The hands come from sketches that I made in the museums of all the saints doing things with their hands. It's really a beautiful work. And maybe that's part of the question and purpose of being an artist, is to use your hands to make actions, to shape material into something else, raw materials, and then they become transformed. And I'm equating that to a garden that finally receives rain. So this is about the idea of space, the concept of space. And really there's an illusion here. Which is the water? Which is the sky? They flatten out. There's reflections. But that illusion becomes very interesting to me. And in my work, I play with that. What makes that happen from the wind, from the light, from distance. And actually, I think that my mental map of all these spaces is greater than actually being able to see it. In Nebraska, I'm very aware of the mountains, the Rocky Mountains. They affect our weather incredibly. And it's 500 miles away, but we understand that direction. So it becomes what is invisible becomes really important. And it's there whether we acknowledge it or not. Often to me, that's about why there's so much empty space in my work, untouched paper. It becomes a formal game that I play with. If is it printed or is it empty? But sometimes that emptiness is actually really significant, like in Island, that land, or in Twain, those empty squares are untouched, but they become the subject. And here's another shaped paper print. It's like looking at architecture. I'm moving through like a memory map, and it becomes like a sanctuary, the temple grounds that you can mentally walk through. So what happens in that space becomes a question, and you know it can change in a moment. It could be cataclysmic and something happens like a tornado, or those storms that have energy and they're powerful, and there's the forces that end up making us feel very small. So I'm thinking of that particularly in this work, Fractured Terrain, with the flowing undulations of time, of space, of the macrocosmic and the microcosmic, which is a beautiful text in here by Umberto Eco that is a metaphor about the avalanches of stone. It's like his words are like a tsunami flowing out, and this river of stone is moving. And I made this work at the time of the big tsunami, and how many, 500,000 people died in that one. And this print actually is not a book, but I think it very much fits into the book concept because of that square format that's suggesting a book-like shape, but it's filled with sedimentary layers, like of a geological time. All those stratas, but they're suggesting pages as well as being a record book. Here's a recent work that is a paper landscape. I collaborated with Helen Hebert, who made the handmade paper with her watermarks in it. And then I did the woodblock printing that responded to those watermarks. And it's very much a light affected work, how you can see through it from both sides, and the front and back become very effective. And a beautiful text that is kind of our back and forth thinking of the concepts of this landscape, the land escaping. Is it a poem? I'm not sure, but it's our words. And at various times I've taken my work and had opportunities to install it in unusual ways and presentations. These prints are leaning out of the wall as if they're on a bookshelf, but it allows the light to move through them, front and back, and you get the ephemeral quality of the paper itself. But it's really a way to bring in a lot of light and to create a surrounding of being enclosed in those pages. Here's another one of those installations. So this is a different version of the book that I showed you in the very first slide, Aqua Alta. Now it's stretched out. We're looking at the front and back. The light, again, is making you enclosed in an envelope. And then another recent installation was layers of paper, very translucent paper. This is lying on the floor, so I don't have a very good image of it installed on the wall. But it had motions and airflow and currents and floods of gradient colors. These were the wood blocks that were carved by a laser, which is an experiment that I was able to work with an intern. So my research into the book led me a few years ago to an opportunity to go to Washington, D.C. and do research at the Dibner Library of History of Science and Technology at the Smithsonian, as well as the Library of Congress, and having a chance to look at these beautiful books from the collection and kind of pursue my quest of what was technology back then? What did they imagine? Certainly it was the technology of wars and machinery, things that maybe were fanciful and never built, but the botanicals were interesting, the garden plans, and certainly you can see the design of letters. all of those things became very interesting and influential. And I was looking for new icons that I could play with. So it becomes part of this quest that I'm looking at for the wealth of historical text forms that are out there. You can see it on these inscribed amulets, the letterpress text, other cultures that had writing, that developed ways of communicating, even funny signs. All of that has a cryptic but meaningful sense of relating to how we communicate. So I'm interested in all those as another source of symbols that we all understand and have seen, including the seismograph and the reeds that tell a mapping of the currents for South Sea Islands and the compass rose. And then now we have other forms of invisible communication that are all these microwaves and textings that are going through us physically. So that has led to these new works and images where I've combined some of those elements and new images from, you can see in my sketchbooks there done in the library, the sketches of distillation practices and how they were recording that. The Tower of Babel, strange things that I could find and think that were very interesting. And I combined them in a series of prints that are book-like. They're folios. They're not really bound very much, but they have a beautiful form of that flowing pages on both sides. The series is called Volumina. And I'm not a writer, I'm not a poet, but I do work with words all the time, especially when I'm thinking about titles. So you can see this string of lists of words that I'm working on, and it becomes a really interesting exercise for me to come up with the essence of what an image means and how to distill it down into just the right words that feel right on your tongue when you say them. And then it ends up becoming the title of a print, a very concise way of saying something really important. And of course, I like to use the letterpress. I want to use the type. I want to set with metal type. I have a collection of type, and that takes a lot of effort. And I'm not doing polymer plates. I don't want to design in the computer, so I have the joy and struggle of the limitations of the metal type itself. But of course, that gives an impression that's unlike anything else. So it becomes about the quality of the printed word. Here it's on some handmade paper that I made, and you can see the embossment. It's actually very physical. And I've worked with others' words, and that's a real joy and challenge to find words that are just the right thing that fits with my work. I've worked with living poets, colleagues. Some are famous, some are not. Some I asked to write for me, some I used things they had already done. Some of the poets are long dead. And all of it's for finding words and studying what is going to work with my books. So Lenora Castillo contributed this text that she wrote for me, On This Land. It's very simple and beautiful, about an immigrant who accepts the place they've arrived at by taking a drink of cool water. And this one is the unfolding river of time. It's a song to slow down and to sleep and let life rush by. So that's really good advice that I needed at that time. This is a recent work where I made the handmade paper, and the handmade paper carries effects that are like writing, the little stains, the dots, the stencil work that ended up creating text-like words. And then I printed the text on top of it. This was done with polymer plates. It's a beautiful poem about the impossible moment of the present and the strings of incidents that are all about reading, voicing, and preserving the written word with ink. And this work is about the precious things that we really hold in our culture: air, water, and oil, and the relationships of the volumes of our life necessities, the proportionate amounts. Air, water, oil. And here's these large prints that are upstairs. Spectacular new works. They're very incredible. The paper was that size, a special paper from Japan that I did not want to cut down. I made these two images to relate to each other about exotic life forces, endangered, and of course in my style, very exaggerated. They're like sanctuaries. And here's the one of the very recent works too, called Release. This I made in honor of my husband who passed away 3 years ago, and all of the wondering that happens, that we do, the waiting and the wondering, and what happens on the other side, the tension, the transitions that's about this metaphor of these curtains. And the poems are by Vasily Kandinsky, the painter, and they're very beautiful and very simple. And it's about that, the tension of when the curtain rises, everybody's so happy. The moment has arrived. The change is there. So it does have a theatrical, tense tension about it. And these are also done recently that follow on that theme of the curtain series. It's the curtains that are drapes, and the presenting another architectural form, and then the detail that could be from the pattern within the curtain fabric itself. It's about what happens next, and I think that's timely for our recent travails through all of the pandemic times. So Constellation Studios in Lincoln, this is the largest work that I've ever made. It's a mural and it's giant. I had to get on the scaffolding and scissors lift, and I had help at the beginning, but I ended up painting most of it because it needed my touch and brush strokes and blendings. It was really fun, but very hard work. And it's spectacular. But it makes a good landmark. It's right there on the entranceway to downtown Lincoln, and it makes a notice that there's an artist living here. So I've made Constellation Studios as a permanent place for me to work within, and as I said, a legacy project. It's meant for everybody to come and use it as a community print center. That's going to take some time. It takes a while to build that audience. But I have exhibitions, paper-making studios, internships, and artist in residencies. You're all invited. Come and see me. And I work with artists, too, to help them make their prints. And here's some details from the studio. It's equipment heavy. I have a lot of presses. And now I have board chairs and a guillotine, my type collection, and the presses, and the books that I make for models for the workshops. But it's been really interesting and amazing for me to have the opportunity to do this activity of organizing something that's what I want to do, and I don't have to ask anybody, no permission. With the glacial pace of the university, this can just happen when I want it to. So it's been a really engaging and interesting thing to do. So I've had lots of workshops. I get to fancy all of my interests, the decorative paper making, the printmaking, having people teach workshops. We're doing marbling here. And I've had some wonderful artists in residence come. Everybody's just been great, including some international artists from Japan and Poland and Finland. And beautiful exhibitions that I can invite artists. Barbara Tettenbaum had a beautiful, important exhibition of her special project about reading My Antonia, a book by Willa Cather. The famous Nebraska author. It was an amazing exploration of almost mental mapping and visualizing that space. And then the other collaboration that was really interesting was working with an Italian group who had a project that was Metropolis. And then I organized a project to do Invisible Cities and invited people to contribute that. And then we made a huge accordion fold book that also toured back to Italy. So this combination of exchange is really wonderful. So Constellation Studios, you can look it up and see what that's about. It's a wonderful opportunity for me to share and to continue keeping an active life. And here's my blue heron again. The blue heron is such an important metaphor for me, and I adopted it way back right out of graduate school because it means about being in the right place at the right time. And that's basically what my art is about. I'm taking chances, I'm being spontaneous, and I made choices that are part of my instinct and experience, and something amazing happens. Just like being in the right place where you see a blue heron fly across the full moon at sunset. And that's had happened. So that's an important metaphor for me still. Thank you so much. I think we have time for some questions, or are we running out of time?
Do we have time? Yeah, we have time for some questions, and Becky has a microphone if you want to raise your hand, if you want to ask Karen questions. Or Quincy also has a microphone.
I'm so curious about your comment about not liking painting. Because I was talking to Kathy today, just thinking like, why did you not ever explore painting when clearly like you're this amazing images? But so I'm curious about that. The mural obviously is a painted project. Mm-hmm. And then the sort of the segue question in there is like, what does the printmaking process uniquely offer you as an image maker?
Good, lots of things. Keep all of them in mind. Actually, when I was in school, in undergraduate school, I did as much painting as I did printmaking, as I did ceramics. And I had to choose. And I chose printmaking because there were less people. And it was a place you could be quiet and learn from the people around you. And I'm very shy, I could be quiet, and having that community, an automatic community, sharing everything was a really wonderful choice. But it also is because it suits my aesthetic. And I realized that at the time too, that I make lines, I'm a line maker. And painting is not about line. It works best in prints, and you have a translation that making your marks in printmaking can enhance and offer something that makes it a unique mark. My brush strokes in a painting looked like anybody else's, nothing special. And I can't paint with all of the details that I can do in a woodcut and all that, the layering and the surprise marks. It would be too laborious. And I actually work very spontaneously, but the print slows it down and captures that and gives it back in a different way. So I've thought about it a lot all these years, especially laboring over things. Why am I doing this? But it's really my language. not painting. I do a little bit of watercolor sometimes, and lately I've been doing some handmade paper that has some stencil work and lots of color, but it all needs a little bit of brush work to kind of refine it. So that's been fun, but it has something that kind of set the stage for that painting marks. But does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.